Hey, all you literary legends and luminaries. I'm Julie, and welcome to another Throwback Thursday episode of Booksmart. Today's book is an oldie but a goodie. It's Benjamin Hoff's The Tao of Pooh. Some background before I begin. I don't usually read self-help books. First of all, I don't care much for their writing style. Either they have the tone of an elementary school teacher, which means their readers must have the academic equivalent of a second grader, or their tone is holier than thou, preachy, you're an idiot if you don't follow this kind of cult-like tone. Plus, I can research to find out the same thing instead of reading a book written in an irritating tone. A friend had given me the organizational one that was all the rage, which I did enjoy, but not enough to keep the book in my limited collection. I would have known nothing about the Tao of Pooh had a friend not had it in her collection. It was one of those books I squealed when I saw it. Who doesn't love Pooh? Let me introduce you to my toddler-sized Piglet. When we were engaged, my husband bought Piglet for me. I identified the most with Piglet. First of all, because he's pink, but also his hesitation, his fear, his lack of assertiveness. I also identified with Rabbit, his organization, bossiness, meticulousness, and his irritation when plans go astray. And we all have a little bit of Eeyore in us. Pooh is the one you envy. You don't want to admit it either, but you like to just go about your day eating honey, and if you don't find any honey, well, you'll find some tomorrow. So Piglet will be my co-host for today's show, and he can sit right here. By the time I discovered this book, I'm old. My son is in high school, that kind of old. I had read some books on mindfulness, but they got old. I knew mindfulness helped ward off anxiety, and my mind goes a mile a minute. I had read 2 different books on mindfulness that essentially said the same thing. I remember they both gave the example that while you're washing dishes, you should be mindful of those dishes. You should be grateful for the food on that plate and grateful that you have a dish to wash. A bad example for me. My least favorite chore as a child was washing dishes. The dishwasher is my best household friend. Not that I didn't get the concept the books were making, I just hated the example. Both books described how you shouldn't even be looking out the window or listening to music. And I always listen to music when I clean. It keeps me from turning into the Dragon Lady. So I didn't quite connect to what the books were teaching me. Can't I be mindful of my music while I clean? By the time the Tao of Pooh entered my life, I was ready for another mindful book. Listen to what is on the back of the book. While Eeyore frets, and Piglet hesitates, and Rabbit calculates, and Owl pontificates, Pooh just is. I had to have this book. When I tried to order it for myself, it was rather difficult to find. I had to order it from a used bookstore. Then when I tried to order copies for my school so I could use it as one of my book club selections, it was also difficult to find. It doesn't appear to be that way anymore. In any case, the book was so unique and so Julie that I kept it in my library. First of all, using Pooh characters to teach mindfulness is genius. And this was back in 1982, before mindfulness was a social media trend, before the internet existed, before our lives became overwhelmed with tiny screens and a constant overflow of information. If Benjamin Hoff would have thought of this concept 30 years later, he'd be a social media influencer. Using Pooh makes understanding an ancient East Asian philosophy not so difficult to comprehend. Pooh also eliminates the annoying elementary school teacher tone of some self-help books. And who didn't love reading Pooh and following along on his adventures? Did I mention I think Hoff was a genius? The book begins with Pooh interrupting our genius author while he tries to write the book. And I've got to read you this first page because it is just adorable. "What's this you're writing?" asked Pooh, climbing onto the writing table. "The Tao of Pooh," I replied. "The how of Pooh?" asked Pooh, smudging one of the words I had just written. "The Tao of Pooh," I replied, poking his paw with my pencil. "It seems more like the ow of Pooh," said Pooh, rubbing his paw. "Well, it's not," I replied huffily. "What's it about?" asked Pooh, leaning forward and smearing another word. "It's about how to stay happy and calm under all circumstances," I yelled. "Have you read it?" asked Pooh. Isn't that just a marvelous way to start the book? Not only does the author interact with Pooh and his friends, but he uses excerpts from Winnie the Pooh to illustrate his points. Abstract philosophical concepts are boiled down to simplistic terms that someone like Pooh can easily understand, but in a way he doesn't need to because he is already living in such a way. As a child, I loved talking animals. I thought my stuffed animals had real lives while I wasn't around. Even today, I feed my squirrels, whom I affectionately refer to as babies because any furry little critter is a baby. So yes, the Tao of Pooh appeals to someone like me. I'm going to gravitate toward it as it ignites my inner child, and I readily relate and giggle as I read such a book. If you aren't an animal lover or a talking animal lover or enjoy little cute animals going on adventures, that doesn't mean this book isn't for you. In fact, you might even get something more out of it than someone like me because I'm already sold on the concept. Someone who doesn't naturally gravitate to all things cute might find many more new ideas in such a book. It might open your mind in ways that go far beyond what I can get out of it. If that made any sense, who would understand what I just said? Let me read to you a part that focuses on Al. Al, who has a spelling problem, but sounds very educated. But sometimes the knowledge of the scholar is a bit hard to understand because it doesn't seem to match up with their own experience of things. In other words, knowledge and experience do not necessarily speak the same language. But isn't the knowledge that comes from experience more valuable than the knowledge that doesn't? It seems fairly obvious to some of us that a lot of scholars need to go outside and sniff around, walk through the grass, talk to the animals, that sort of thing. Lots of people talk to animals, said Pooh. Maybe, but not very many listen, though, he said. That's the problem, he added. I listen to animals. Have you ever watched a baby bunny eat a dandelion? It is the cutest thing on the planet, and it will completely change your mood. You can't help but smile and be calm and be happy, and it's one of the best mindful activities you can do. Pooh would approve. So as the book continues, more and more characters arrive, and our genius author shows the error in some of the prominent characteristics like Rabbit and Eeyore, and how the busy Baxen is not who you want to strive to be. Hoff smoothly integrates Taoism stories within the many layers of Pooh interactions and flashbacks from the original stories. We learn about the uncarved block, Zhu, and Wu Wei, which the author says doesn't translate well into the English language, so he has termed it the Pooh Way. Hoff also applies Pooh's somewhat nonsense songs into elements of Taoism, like Tiddly Palm and Coddleston Pie. I teach at a juvenile detention center, so I encourage my students to read the Tao of Pooh. It's an accessible, easy-to-read book. It's short, the print is large, and there's even happy pictures of our Pooh friends within it. It's not a highfalutin book. Anyone can grasp the concepts within it. Plus, this opens the door for my students to read the original Pooh, which I also have in my library. I have a run-of-the-mill paperback that doesn't look like a children's book. I'm amazed, well, I probably shouldn't be, how many of my students have never read any of Winnie the Pooh. Then I open the door even further and let them watch Goodbye Christopher Robin, which is the heartbreaking story of Milne and his son Christopher Robin, who both despises the creation of Winnie the Pooh. But I use it to show how even children's stories are based in fact. If you didn't know, most of the Pooh characters were created from Milne's son's stuffed animals. I saw them at the New York City Library. Piglet is as flat as a pancake. What I'm getting at here is that this book is fun to read and simple enough to understand. All my students who have read it are surprised with it, but they also tell me it taught them something they didn't already know about. If all of that wasn't enough, Hoff emulates Milne's style of Winnie the Pooh, so he seamlessly goes from one layer of the story to the next. All the parentheses and the capitalized words, it's simply marvelous. And his use of Pooh is even more perfect, if something can in fact be more perfect, when he wraps around the final concept of Taoism. Let me read to you how this goes. But the adult is not the highest stage of development. The end of the cycle is that of the independent, clear-minded, all-seeing child. That is the level known as wisdom. When the Tao Te Ching and other wise books say things like, return to the beginning, become a child again, that's what they're referring to. Why do the enlightened seem filled with light and happiness, like children? Why do they sometimes even look and talk like children? Because they are. The wise are children who know. Their minds have been emptied of the countless minute somethings of small learning and filled with the wisdom of the great nothing, the way of the universe. This book just makes me happy. No other book has made me as happy. At the same time, it brings about a calmness, a better understanding of how to interact with our crazy, intense, overstimulating world. And although I'm somewhat spoiling the ending, I have to read the way the book ends because it is just perfect. Within each of us, there is an owl, a rabbit, an Eeyore, and a Pooh. For too long, we have chosen the way of owl and rabbit. Now, like Eeyore, we complain about the results. But that accomplishes nothing. If we are smart, we will choose the way of Pooh, as if from far away it calls to us with the voice of a child's mind. It may be hard to hear at times, but it is important just the same, because without it, we will never find our way through the forest. Thanks for watching. As always, my goal here at Booksmart is to get a little bit smarter, one book at a time.